Can Tyler Huntley and the Baltimore Ravens end the Pittsburgh Steelers season in Week 18? We talk about that and so much more coming up next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens. We're your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much, as always, for being here with me today, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes over in video form on YouTube and audio form wherever you get your shows. Be sure to subscribe, follow along. It's the same show, both audio and video. We are a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast, so Monday through Friday, plus bonus content like live shows, bringing you all of that here. Tell a friend, tell a family member. Word of mouth is super important, even in today's technology age. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most sustainable way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code lowercase LockedOnNFL for first deposit match up to $100. We're back here. This Ravens team has nothing to play for in Week 18 besides, I guess, some pride if you're talking about the Ravens and beating a division rival in the Pittsburgh Steelers and, I guess, preventing a sweep there. Now, we did get some news on Wednesday that Lamar Jackson is not going to play in this game. He's going to be replaced in the starting lineup by Tyler Huntley. The right decision. And we're talking with Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers today for Crossover Thursday. Now, Chris and I recorded the episode before John Harbaugh revealed Lamar was not going to start in this one. So we still kind of debated if the Ravens were going to play Lamar. And throughout the episode, you'll notice I talked as if he wasn't going to play. I kind of knew this was coming. But again, if you hear, oh, well, the Ravens are going to rest Lamar or not, it's because, again, we didn't know. But I'm telling you right now, John Harbaugh announced that Lamar not going to play. It's the right decision. So can Tyler Huntley take over the reins and defeat the Steelers and effectively end their season? Let's talk with Chris about it now.
Kevin, this is I know that there was a lot of celebrating going on in the Ravens locker room after the beatdown that they handed the Miami Dolphins, the locking up of the 1 seed. But now the question now turns to, how hard will they try to go this game? Of course, they want to win this game. This is their rival. There's the classic saying, "You're not a Raven until you've beaten the Pittsburgh Steelers." But this is a week where, in a league where everyone's going down, it's just the Dolphins just lost 2 key starters. The entire AFC North. Lamar Jackson is the only AFC North quarterback that's still healthy right now. You look at the entirety of that. Is there a sense from the Ravens they're going to protect a lot of their key playmakers for this game and maybe rest them against the Steelers?
Yeah, there hasn't been any official word yet on whether the Ravens will rest guys or not. Now, we're recording this before the Ravens finish up their Wednesday practice, so maybe by the time anybody's listening to this, John Harbaugh would have provided more clarification. But if I had to assume, the Ravens are dealing with a bit of, I guess, banged upness where they've had guys all season. They haven't necessarily lost a ton of guys, at least not as many as we've seen over the past 4 years, to season-ending injuries. Obviously, Mark Andrews, although there maybe is a glimmer of hope he could come back for the playoffs, not entirely sure yet there. But really the only other guys who have been lost for the season, J.K. Dobbins in week 1, Keaton Mitchell, David Ojabo, and I mean, that's really it. The Ravens designated slot corner Darius Washington to return from injured reserve today, so we'll see what his practice window and timeline is. But, for example, Kyle Hamilton dealing with the knee injury, sprained MCL. I assume the Ravens will definitely rest him in this one with nothing to play for. The Ravens, you talked about it, locked into that 1 seed. Record-wise, does not matter if the Ravens lose to the Steelers or beat them. But obviously, everybody in Baltimore, we know what this rivalry is, Chris. The Ravens, they want to beat the Steelers. Ravens fans want to beat the Steelers, but Patrick Queen's been dealing with some stuff. Marlon Humphrey got injured last week against the Dolphins. Those guys aren't going to play. But the key one to everybody is Lamar Jackson.
Of course.
Because right now, nobody is, I guess, healthy at this time of year, but in terms of an injury on the injury report of him looking banged up, he's good to go. But in my opinion, and again, maybe we'll get more clarification on this from John Harbaugh, but to me, Lamar is just too important to the Ravens. You know, talking about him as an MVP, and in my opinion, he is the most valuable player to a team in the NFL. We know Pittsburgh has a pass rush. We know who TJ Watt is. We know who Alex Highsmith is. Those guys are good football players. if they beat, let's say the Ravens don't play their offensive lineman, let's say Ronnie Stanley gets rest, Morgan Moses gets rest. Well, Steelers have something to play for. They're going to bring their guys. They're going to bring the heat. Can you trust TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith to get past those backup offensive linemen? I would if I were the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if you're playing them more of the backup offensive line, just doesn't make much sense to me if that's the position you go. Tyler Linderbaum's been playing great all season. Do you rest him, put in a backup? So in my opinion, they should definitely rest Lamar. Now, that doesn't mean I think the Ravens have no shot to beat the Steelers. I think it's still going to be a competitive game nonetheless. And Tyler Huntley's come in, and he's won some games for the Ravens in Lamar's absence. So even if Lamar plays a quarter, a couple drives, a half, I just don't know if that's the smartest decision for them. Obviously, Chris, we were in the same situation 4 years ago when the Ravens locked up the number 1 seed, and it was week 17 back then, not week 18. But the Ravens decided to rest everybody they could and just get ready for that divisional round matchup. And there's the whole conversation about rest versus rust. I know a lot of people are very wary about what happened in 2019 and how poorly that season ended. 2006 also ended very poorly for the Ravens when they hosted the divisional round there at M&T Bank. So to me, I'd rest the starters. I know that's what Pittsburgh wants, right? That gives them the better shot to win. But again, it doesn't hand them a win. They still have to go out there and earn it if that is the case.
Absolutely. And listen, we've talked about this how many times now? Like, the Steelers and the Ravens, no matter how bad or good one or the other is, these two teams take each other to the mat. It is often a dogfight to the end. And that's what I'm fully expecting in this matchup, regardless of who Baltimore plays. But another factor where I think that it would behoove the Ravens to rest Lamar Jackson, specifically Lamar Jackson, even not even considering Patrick Queen and everyone else who's dealing with banged upness. Lamar Jackson this year has a 102.7 pass rating, career 98 pass rating. When he plays the Pittsburgh Steelers, his pass rating is 66.8. He's been sacked 20 times in his career against the Steelers. In fact, the only time that he's won as a starter was when he faced Mason Rudolph, who got knocked out in that game, and Devlin Hodges came in, and that was, I believe, an overtime win that the Ravens won, and that one way back in 2019. That's the only time that he's won a start against the Steelers, and not the winning part of it, but it's like what you said. The Steelers pass rush, can get active. TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, the emergence of Nick Herbig. They know how to play Lamar Jackson. Like, it's beyond just their talent. The Steelers and the Ravens know each other, and Lamar Jackson, the Steelers are the one team that he has not gone bonkers against in any game. And I think that's where, if I'm the Ravens, I say, hey, we're going to rest him this week, make sure that he's fully healthy. We've seen all the quarterbacks get injured this year, and even just in the AFC North. Let's make sure he's good. If I'm the Ravens, I'm also protecting Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, all those key players, because you want to make sure that your crew is able to come back fresh. You know that your team can win. They've been dominant all year long. So I feel like that is where you probably lean here. Now, I say all that to say, if you're the Ravens also, you still, even if your backups play, you're fighting like heck to win this game, because you're 13-3 on the season. 2 of those 3 losses are to the AFC North in the Browns and the Steelers. If anything, you would prefer to not have to face either of those teams. The Browns are already locked into the 5 seed. Technically, they could be the 6th seed if the Dolphins lose, and there's a whole scenario there. But point is, the Browns are in the playoffs, and at some point either you're going to have to worry about them or worry about them being knocked off by somebody else. But the Steelers are another team that they're not as talented as the Ravens. Their roster is not as complete as the Ravens. But you know that when those two teams play, no matter where each other are, it is going to be a dogfight. And I think that the Ravens probably look at, I'd rather take on the struggling Chiefs, the up and down Bills, or the Dolphins that you just beat by 40 points than take on division rivals who are going to give you a fight to the bitter end.
And it's something I've been saying, because a stat that, everybody's obsessed with now, at least, is, Lamar is 20-1 against the NFC. And part of that, I think, is because they just don't see him a lot. It's sometimes those players' first times playing against them. Maybe they played against them once before. I think it's not taking away from what Lamar's done. He's obviously earned that record. But when you play a division rival time after time again, it can go one of 2 ways, right? You figure it out or they figure you out. And I think for the Ravens and Steelers, the Ravens have still won games against the Steelers. I mean, I agree. If you pick one team who Lamar has struggled against in his career, if you only have one choice, it is Pittsburgh. It is that defense. And those stats will back it up too. The eye test will back it up as well. But against teams like the Bengals and the Browns, Lamar's dominated both those teams. So I think it's a credit to Pittsburgh in how they've been able to kind of get after Lamar. And look, TJ Watt, I mean, he's a big part of it. They obviously have talented playmakers there. So to play a division rival 3 times in 1 year, I mean, look, Baltimore and Pittsburgh have done it many times over the course of their franchise history, back in those late 2000s, whatever you want to say. The Ravens and Steelers have matched up 3 times in a season, twice in the regular season, and then once again in the playoffs. Now, the thing with Baltimore is I just think there's such a gap between them and any other team where you're right. I would rather play the Chiefs, I think, because, I think even though the Ravens are going to be favored probably in every single game here, FanDuel or friends over there are probably going to have them favored. There is an element of this where, look, it doesn't matter how good you are in the regular season. It doesn't, because once you hit the playoffs, it's a whole new season. It doesn't matter how well you play in the regular season. You can be the best team in the regular season like we saw the Ravens do in 2019, but guess what? They weren't the best team in the playoffs, and that's why here in Baltimore, we don't talk about that 2019 team the way we should, because I think maybe whether they were looking ahead to the championship game or, they just had too much rest, it doesn't matter. But whoever comes into M&T Bank Stadium in the divisional round is going to be this. Ravens are going to have the rest, and that one team who's coming in is going to have a really good win probably and be charged up off of that momentum. So it's a battle of that. But to me, Pittsburgh right now, if Mason Rudolph can prove to be the guy, and he can prove that, hey, you know what, this isn't just a 2-week fluke and, leads the Steelers to the playoffs here, Steelers can sneak in. I mean, again, you can't count out anybody, but to me, I just think Baltimore, and this isn't just a Steeler thing, Baltimore is just too far ahead of everybody in the AFC for me to say, any team can go in there and beat them, because I think my expectations have changed, Chris, where I used to say AFC championship or bust. I think they've been so good this year where if they don't make the Super Bowl, you really have to question, because they've passed all the tests and now they're the test.
I feel you. They are the test right now. I mean, and they've proven it, because, I looked at, going into the final part of the season, I looked at the Ravens end of the season schedule, and I was like, there's space for the Ravens to kind of mess things up. They were at the Jaguars, then the Jaguars fell off. But then you're at the Niners and you smoke the Niners, and then you're hosting the Dolphins and you smoke the Dolphins. And again, not just eat those out. You held the Ravens held all 3 of those opponents to less than 20 points, and then scored more than 30 against 2 of them. So, and they've scored more than 30 points 3 of the last 4 games they played. So they're playing the schedule. Best. Yeah, it's a playoff schedule. They're playing the best football in the NFL right now, and that should be slighted. But we got to talk about other situations. The Steelers might get back 2 key starters for this game on defense. We'll talk about that and other key matchups, and just how hot this division is right now here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's Crossover Thursday. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also sponsored by BetterHelp Therapy Online. Life is full of twists and turns, and it's important to show up for yourself through all of them. I faced plenty of times in my life when I've tried to shoulder on burdens, but found answers thanks to the help of good therapists. That's where BetterHelp Online Therapy comes in, because they will assess your needs and they can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. It's not a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional therapy done online, available to people worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your therapist whenever you need help. And with therapy, they know it can take a few tries to find the right fit for you. That's why BetterHelp makes it easy and free to change therapists if needed. And they have a special offer for all our listeners. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. That's 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. That's BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. Back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's Chris Carter and Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Steelers and Locked On Ravens. Kevin, the Steelers, it's not official yet as of now, but we have gotten the reports that Minkah Fitzpatrick and Landon Roberts, Steelers starting safety and linebacker, are back and healthy at practice, at least working through practice on Wednesday as we record this Wednesday afternoons. We don't have either team's injury report for Wednesday as we're recording this earlier in the afternoon, but that's a big help to the Steelers, who their defense has been strung together by Scotch tape with the injuries that they've had. They've had practice squatter upon practice squatter upon practice squatter. Patrick Peterson went from a starting corner to being a starting safety because they needed help back there, because between Minkah Fitzpatrick, DeMonte Casey, Keanu Neal, Elijah Riley, and Trenton Thompson, they were down 5 safeties for the past few weeks, past month really. And getting Minkah Fitzpatrick just as one safety, as their best safety. And I believe he's just actually been nominated to the Pro Bowl. But to getting him back would be a boost just to give them at least one guy back there that can call the shots. And then Landon Roberts, who had been arguably their best linebacker this year, he looked like he might be out for the season with a pec injury, but he looks like he could return this week. That could be huge for a Steelers defense that, like you said, even if Lamar Jackson doesn't play, Huntley knows this offense. And this is a Ravens offense that when you look at it across the board, they're the second scoring offense. They're the fourth when it comes to yards, and they're the number one rushing offense in the NFL. It's still gonna take an all hands on deck efforts from the Steelers defense to limit this group.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the Ravens, you have talent all across the board, and that's what's helped them get to where they are this year. So when you talk about resting guys and doing all this, Steelers are getting reinforcements, and the Ravens, I think, are kind of taking this approach where, look, if it's the case where they don't have anything to play for, they can rest their guys and still feel confident, because players like when Marcus Williams had to miss a bunch of the season, Geno Stone stepped up. He's second in the NFL right now with 7 interceptions. Guys like Brandon Stevens have really stepped up. I wouldn't expect him to play in this game. But then other guys, Ronald Darby, who they signed essentially a couple weeks before the season for some depth, has played really, really well as a depth piece. But when you talk about the Ravens offense, one area that has actually impressed me is the offensive line depth. And Ronnie Stanley's had his struggles at times here, but I think it all starts up front with an offensive line. And for the Ravens, Patrick McCary, the Ravens do a rotation is what they've been doing with their offensive line. So Ronnie Stanley and Morgan Moses will start the game. And then maybe after a couple of drives, Stanley will come out and Patrick McCary will come in. Then McCary will go out, Stanley will come back in, but then Moses comes out, and then backup right tackle Daniel Faalele comes in, and they interchange those guys throughout the game. Now, would they do that if Stanley and Moses rest in this game? And I just think they give Faalele and McCary all the reps. But let's say Zay Flowers doesn't play. They've had other guys. Nelson Aguilar was someone who was signed by the Ravens. It was their first signing, and everybody lost their minds in Baltimore because it was, they can't do it again. It's this veteran receiver, it's Sammy Watkins and Michael Crabtree, and it's happening again. And I said, I hear you. It can't be the move, but it can be a move. And luckily, the Ravens then brought in Odell. They drafted Zay Flowers, and it was fine. Aguilar's been awesome as like a fourth wide receiver for them. Odell, I don't think maybe he won't play in this game. Aguilar, Tyler Wallace. So Steelers are getting back reinforcements. But again, for Tyler Huntley, the big question with him, and if you're just kind of scouting that out if Lamar doesn't play, his deep ball has not been great. Some of his decision-making has not been great either. Now, we haven't really seen Huntley start a game this year, luckily, because Lamar has been healthy. But this is a time for Tyler Huntley. We've been talking here in Baltimore. Maybe this is Tyler's last year because they bring in Malik Cunningham from the Patriots, and Huntley's a free agent after the season. Is this maybe an audition if Tyler Huntley plays against a really good Steelers defense who, again, are getting some guys back? So while the Ravens don't have anything to play for from a standings perspective or a seeding perspective, no team in the NFL, no player in the NFL will just lie down and let a team take it from them, right? Exactly. This means a lot to those guys, whether it's tape, whether it's auditions, whether it's pride. The Ravens are going to try to win regardless of who plays. But look, we know Pittsburgh has something to play for. They're not going to lay down. They want their season to continue into January.
Absolutely. That's the thing. Both of these teams are going to want this win. I think the question is, for the Ravens, that's not about want. It's about making sure that you're healthy for the games that actually matter, because you throw everything you got into this game and then you lose, say, Marlon Humphrey, you lose Roquan Smith or Lamar Jackson or anybody, then you're going to be looking at like, why did we do that? And that's just a realistic approach there that I think that everyone's looking like they're going to at least rest most of those big name guys. Not all of them, but enough of them to protect them down that stretch. And I also got to say, this is right now, I think you can say this is, if it's not the best division in football, I think it is. It's the hottest division in football. You look at the way that the three teams that are either in the playoffs or fighting for the playoffs right now have played at least the last 2 weeks. The Steelers have won their last two with scoring 30 points each. They were struggling the 3 games before that, but the Ravens have won 6 in a row now. The Browns have won 4 in a row, and you look at how these teams have played down the stretch here. If the AFC North does get 3 playoff teams here, I think there's somewhat of a likelihood that there might be an AFC North AFC Championship game with all because there's no team in the AFC that I view out as the ultimate powerhouse outside of the Ravens, like we did the Chiefs when Patrick Mahomes, Kelsey, and Hill were in their prime, or even like the Bengals were supposed to be this year with Burrow and Chase and Higgins and all their guys, or like the Bills were supposed to be with Allen and Diggs and all their crew. So you look at all those teams, like every one of those other teams in the AFC that are supposed front runners. I think every single AFC North team can not only hang with, but beat them. And heck, the Ravens beat the Dolphins soundly, just this past weekend. I think that the Browns and the Steelers could give all of them a run for their money. And it's a very notable sign. We talked about this before the season, Kevin, but I think the AFC North has lived up to the hype as far as the talent of the division.
Yeah, I think you got off to a bit of a slower start than some people might have anticipated. But again, you talk about the health situations, and this is exactly what we were talking about with the Bengals back when they went to the Super Bowl. Health is a key part in every single sport, not just football, every sport. The Ravens in 2019, I think, had 2 major injuries the entire season. It was Pernell McPhee and Tavon Young. They kept their entire roster healthy for the most part, and then the divisional round, they lost a couple of guys, or a couple of guys got injured. Mark Andrews, Mark Ingram really had an impact on them. They played that game. I mean, you can talk about how I think for sure the playoffs are fun for that reason, where any team can beat any team. It's kind of like any given Sunday, but like maximized by like 10 times, because you go out there and you don't play your best game, you don't get next week. You're done. It's it. So it's different than basketball and different than baseball, where you have the 5-game series, the 7-game series. That's it. You can even talk about basketball, where we just saw literally last year, Milwaukee Bucks. They're the 1 seed. They have the whole thing going for them. Miami comes in there as this like gritty team, right? No one gives them a chance, and they knock them off. It wasn't even 7 games. It was 5 games. Like it was unreal.
People don't know this about me, but I've been a Heat fan since they drafted Dwayne Wade back in 2003. So like that during that run, I was losing. I was like, Jimmy buckets. So but to your point, we've seen that. Like we've seen it. Heck, we've seen some of these teams do it. The Steelers, when they won the Super Bowl in Super Bowl 40, they were the first team that was a wild card to go all the way and win a Super Bowl and win 3 straight road games. Not that this Steelers team is going to do that, but I'm saying there are plenty of teams that, and it's become more common, because I think the Packers did it when they beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl. I think the Giants did it when they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. There's been more and more times that it's happened now. I think it's part of it's also the lack of disparity between the top and the bottom in the NFL. There's a lot more parity right now, and with that parity, you see teams being able to dig at each other more often. And I think that's a realistic thing. And we always say the NFL is a week-to-week league. You could be on top of the world one moment and out of it the next. That's another thing that I think you have a very good point about. The Ravens don't want to be that team that got ice cold after such a great season, because you're right. Not only a conference championship appearance, getting to the Super Bowl, it needs to be part of the goal. Winning the Super Bowl needs to be part of the goal, because you have something right now with Lamar Jackson. You have something now with the players around him and the things that you developed. You don't know if you get those chances again. For example, we did the AFC North breakdown and everything. Every one of us picked the Bengals to win the division. Now they're out of the playoffs. There's talk about T. Higgins not being able to return. Who knows what direction that franchise will go, while the other 3 teams are fighting for the playoffs and growing this year. It is such a week-to-week league and a year-to-year league. Yeah,
100%. And to me, I think that, look, the Ravens, they've played so well. They have too much talent. They've passed every single test to me to say, well, they're my Super Bowl pick for right now because of how well they've played. I think that this team is different from 2019, but if that happens again to them, if they lose their first playoff game, if they don't make it to the Super Bowl, there have to be some conversations, because again, expectations change throughout the season. But I still believe in the Ravens that they can get the job done, but you can't overlook anybody, which they've done a good job. That they've been locked in all season. The vibes have been good, and that's another part to winning a Super Bowl. It's not just how you play on the field, but sometimes those distractions can get pretty distracting, and it takes away from what happens for a really good football team. So I think Baltimore has it in them, but you can't look too far ahead if you're this Ravens team, because other teams want to win it too, and they don't care how good your regular season was. All they have to do is beat you in the playoffs, and that's all it takes.
Absolutely. We'll get to some of the key matchups in this game to see who does have some key advantages. All that here and more on Crossover Thursday here in the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter, Kevin Ostreicher, stick with us. We got a lot to discuss. But first, I want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in to make it easier to find people that you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job on the purple hashtag hiring frame for your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Back here on Crossover Thursday here in the Locked On Podcast Network, Chris Carter, Kevin Ostreicher of Locked On Steelers and Locked On Ravens. Let's talk about some key matchups here. So you mentioned the potential of resting offensive tackles. Let's say they start versus the backups play. What is the biggest concern that you have for matchup wise if considering the Steelers have the edge rushers that they do right now, Kevin?
Yeah, well, either way, I think that it's going to be a tough task regardless. Now, the thing with the Ravens, and it's really weird to say, but Ronnie Stanley arguably has been their weakest starting offensive lineman this year. And honestly, it's probably not even arguable. I think it is a fact that he has been. And we all know what happened all those years ago, really now, Chris, against Pittsburgh, where TJ Watt gets thrown into him. And it's a really unfortunate injury. It misses essentially 2 years because of it. And he's been dealing with a knee injury this year. It's a little different where he's had to go in and out of the lineup a couple times this season. The anchor hasn't been there as much as we would like here in Baltimore. But I think the rotation has actually helped, and Ronnie Stanley has said as much. So for me, if Stanley starts, it's about just getting him the rest in the game he needs so he can be in tip-top shape. Same thing with Morgan Moses. But again, TJ Watt has so many different moves. He's so strong. I mean, you can line him up against any one of these guys and he'll take their lunches. It's not a matter of if he'll do it, it's when. And you can try to slow him down, but it's like Myles Garrett. It's like Aaron Donald. These guys are going to get theirs eventually. Now against the Rams, the Ravens did a really good job. Aaron Donald did not record a stat, actually. It was one pass deflection. But I think that when you're the Ravens and you have this situation, you also have to look at the interior, and the interior has been playing pretty well this year. Tyler Linderbaum's at an all-pro level. Kevin Zeitler is as steady as ever. John Simpson's been pretty good there, but I think it's outside here where Daniel Falele is a huge mountain of a man offensive tackle, can pull out into space and do his thing. He's athletic. But, for me, is he going to be able to hold down Alex Highsmith or TJ Watt for an entire game? And if they do rest Stanley, they do rest Moses, it'll be Patrick McCary on the left side, who has been really, really steady. And I think it was Von Miller. I can't remember who it was. I think it was Von Miller who said that he's one of the best tackles in the league a couple of years ago when he was still with Denver. So those two guys are still more than serviceable. But again, if it's not Stanley, it's not Moses, it'll be those two guys. If not Linderbaum, Sam Mustipher would probably start, who had a really bad time in Chicago, but has played really well in Baltimore. And maybe that's just playing for the Bears. And that's just what happens when you play for the Bears. But I think that at this point, the Ravens still have really quality offensive line depth, and I've been surprised at how they played this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it is you need depth and you need execution. But when you see those rushing stats for the Ravens, it's not just Lamar Jackson and Keaton Mitchell and whoever else they just throw in at running back. I think part of the reason you see so many running backs go in there and have success is because their offensive line is able to move people. And I think Tyler Linderbaum plays a big factor in that. I think one thing that you see, I think that's on both sides, you take each other very seriously. Cam Hayward came out to the Steelers locker room on Wednesday and said, hey, we remember losing to the 2019 Ravens when they lost it, when they rested pretty much their whole team. We're not taking anybody lightly right now. And that game wasn't even close. They lost 28-10. Granted, the Steelers were at a different spot with Devlin Hodges starting, and that team was kind of out of gas at the end of a season where it was remarkable they fought to 8 wins in the first place with all the things they had going against them. This team feels very different for the Steelers. You got Mason Rudolph, yes, but he's playing very well. The offense has scored 30 points for back-to-back games in the first time since 2020. The defense, despite missing a ton of starters, they've been playing very well. They're still the seventh best scoring defense in the NFL right now. This is still a Steelers team that I think isn't looking at this neither as a light game, but neither as a game that like, oh man, we just need to get a little bit more gas to get over the hump. I think the Steelers team is hungry and they're trying to prove something in this game. And I think the Ravens, we try to prove something too. Like, I don't think this is going to, again, I think this game is going to be a lot closer than anyone who thinks the Ravens are going to bowl over the Steelers, or anyone who thinks the Ravens backups are going to just lay down for the Steelers. I think that this is going to be a classic AFC North fight that everyone's watching on Saturday at 4:30. And it's going to be a fun one to watch for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. And look, no Ravens fan wants to see the Steelers win, and no Steelers fan wants to see the Ravens win. I mean, it's just that simple, where a lot of people, they don't want here in Baltimore the Steelers to get a sweep on the Ravens this year, regardless of it doesn't mean anything for the Ravens in terms of the 1 seed and their seeding in the playoffs or anything like that. You don't want to lose to a division rival. And again, as we kind of talked about earlier in the show, Chris, if the backups do play, it's going to mean a lot to them. Right? It's not that it wouldn't mean anything to the starters, but there are different reasons for everybody to play, different reasons why everybody loves the game. And for a player like Tyler Huntley, as we talked earlier about in the show, is it an audition tape for him? He's going to ball out if he wants to do that. If he wants to get on a team and try to win a starting job, he has to ball out. So I think it'll be a close game too. I don't expect any type of different blowout here, but I think it should be a good game, and it's on a Saturday, so it'll be a national spotlight, which will be interesting.
Yeah, thanks, NFL, for giving us a Saturday game. So didn't have other plans that day to just be able to enjoy before the craziness of Sunday happens. But yeah, I think I'm right with you on this. And to your point about wanting to beat the Steelers have won 6 of the last 7. The Ravens definitely want to prove something there. Like they're still like they don't take that lightly. And there were stretches where the Ravens got the best of the Steelers for quite some time. The Steelers would talk about that and be like, we got to get off the schneid here.
Chris is awesome, and this game's going to be good. Again, I think just because Lamar's not starting, we'll see that with the other injured players. Are they going to start? Are they going to rest? I think the Ravens are still going to, again, it's like if the Ravens don't play their guys, they're going to lose to Pittsburgh. That's not the case whatsoever. Baltimore's gotten this far because of their depth. I really do think that the Ravens have a good shot to win this game. And coming up tomorrow in our final episode of the week, we'll be talking about this Ravens team and whether they can end the Steelers season, which would feel so, so good for Baltimore. Stay tuned for that. We have a lot coming up. Subscribe, follow along again. Really appreciate everybody tuning in. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.